gentle and easy. And remember that if you're having difficulty releasing any one particular body part, and it's not easily corrected by adjusting your posture or something like that, then you may want to simply focus on softening elsewhere in your body, because as we've talked about a lot in the last few classes, every part is quite directly related to every other part. And so perhaps if one hip is extra tight, softening even that opposite shoulder can make a tremendous difference in your posture. If you stop gripping your jaw, perhaps you find that your head releases up or your lower back softens further. Even if you notice that your feet are cold, by warming them up, this will help soften the lower legs, which perhaps takes pressure out of your belly, and then suddenly you can breathe better. I'm just inventing these connections, but those kinds of things I see all of the time in the clinic. So you want to really take the time to notice what's going on. And if one spot is really bothering you, just look elsewhere. Allow the softness from other spaces in your body to spread into those troubled spaces. Continue releasing your breath. If you find it being inhibited in any way, avoid beginning to push and pull on it harder, and instead let go of whatever that inhibition is. Try to soften around it to make space. Just another few minutes of quiet sitting. If you notice your mind wandering away, simply release the distraction. Don't try forcing your awareness back. Just let go of the distraction, soften around it. And your awareness should settle back into the present moment on its own. With every exhalation, your whole body releases. With each inhalation, your mind grows quiet, your whole body is still. When you're ready, getting your hands nice and warm. Welcome, Del. Nice to have you here. The emphasis today is on this process of learning how to let go. Remember that when we emphasize trying to push things away or force things to change, then all we're doing is feeding into that cycle of tension. If I focus on trying to soften the tense places all the time, most of what I'm focusing on is my tension. And by putting your awareness in tension, you tend to get more tension. So instead, allow your mind to be soft and open, to recognize those spaces that are more perfectly themselves, more soft, natural, and connected. And allow that softness to spread. Because if you place your awareness into the soft, open spaces, that's more likely to expand. You can try that in your relationships as well, that if you talk to the best part of somebody, they tend to speak back to you from that aspect of themselves. If you talk to the worst parts of somebody, whatever that is, you're likely to get more of that. So it's the same principle with everything that we do. And as usual, I'd like to let the people know that might be watching this quiet in the background, unsure of what we're doing, that down below the video in the comment section is a link to an introduction video to this particular set. And that will answer a lot of your questions and make it much easier for you to follow along and practice with us. Softening around the eyes, behind the eyes, quieting the mind. Tuning in your awareness to that space just beneath the skin, on top of the bone, the muscles, and the little spaces in between. Develop the ability to feel that sense of warmth and your awareness soaking into that space. Releasing, nourishing. Be careful not to push right past it. If you notice that your skin becomes very irritated from all of this touching of your face, you can do a different kind of touch. You can make sure your hands are clean. You can use maybe a cream that works better for you, or just do smaller numbers of things, lighter touch. Find a way to release your face without irritating your skin. Everybody's so different, but we tend to have so much stagnation and obstruction through our face and head. We want to take the time to help release it and find a way to relieve that. For instance, when I release this point here, this Tai Yang point at the side of the head, Tai Yang is a great little spot where we tend to accumulate tension, and it tends to come up into the head. And as I release it, I have a sense of warmth spreading down my face, almost like liquid flowing down the side of my head. And if I follow that down, it just leads me to the next point, which is, of course, why we have this set arranged the way we do. We want to take the time to relieve those kinks and folds and striations and obstructions in the fascial system and the skin, that which connects through to the muscle and the channels and the blood flow. Sorry, I skipped one here.
So we have a question related to this. Should we be using our fingers at all to use the skin other than placement? Like, should our movement begin and end in the shoulder joint, basically?
That makes sense to you?
Yeah, I wonder if the question is like, should we be moving our fingers or should they just simply be touching the skin? And maybe the question is, where does the movement originate?
So if you're talking, like Mel's recommending, that if we're talking about how we move the fingers, are we moving our fingers like this? For some people, that's all they can do. And remember that movement, there are no muscles in the fingers, and so it's really movement in the hand. And so if you can start to understand, for instance, how we're engaging our hand, and then perhaps you can notice how the hand is related to the forearm, which is related to the upper arm, to the shoulders. Eventually, the movements themselves can be part of and be generated through the center. But for most people, that's way too much to ask. And so I would say that allow the movements to be delicate and refined in the touch of your fingers, and the movement eventually will come through your whole body, especially through the center, depending on your level of skill. I hope that answered your question. Allowing everything to settle, to be soft, become quiet. Remember that one of the muscles that you want to relax is not just your shoulder, not just your jaw, but the part of your mind that is trying to change things and fix things and make things different, and that isn't quite comfortable with how things are. That piece of the mind, a piece of awareness, can be at rest so that you are simply here, fine with things how they are, just being content, being where you are in this moment. And that's a kind of relaxation. There's a certain muscle. It would be nice to be able to point to it. And that little muscle relaxes and suddenly you're just here doing your thing, not trying to change anything. And that's a very important muscle to learn to relax. And I'll keep pointing at it. If you can find how to soften that, and even a small way, that it makes a really big difference. And something that Mel and I were talking about is this tendency to talk about things in extremes, that in order to feel better, you have to be completely, 100% healed in this way or this way. And it seems like a really long road. But very often things work in these plateaus, these different stages and levels or thresholds. And sometimes just releasing 1% is enough to drop you into a different space entirely. That maybe that 1% was just holding you in this new zone of tension or discomfort or pain or disconnection. And just by healing 1%, softening 1%, just a little bit in your jaw or a little bit in that aspect of your need to change things, suddenly your entire outlook is different. Your personality changes, your relationships shift. You don't have to think in terms of some distant goal. Sometimes just a little bit is enough, and you'll achieve the shift that you're looking for, and everything gets easier.
If there's space at the end, definitely take other people's questions first, but I wonder if it's worth talking about
I think you should roll that over here.
The seeming paradox between allowing things to be exactly as they are and this practice of learning to identify tension and let go of tension. Sometimes they, at least to my mind, can seem like they're in conflict with one another, and that can sometimes create confusion. I think Shirku talks about it in the context of lack of tension. So
lack
if you feel like
attention,
talking
yeah.
about that at the end.
That's a really good one. Well, it's worth talking about as we continue. So as I soften through the shoulder here, ZhiCheng Shifu uses this really fun example. For those of you who have ever played the carnival game Whack-A-Mole, it's a United States thing. I don't know if it's elsewhere, where there's a little doll or a structure that pops out of a hole and you're supposed to hit it with a hammer. And then another one pops over here and you hit it with a hammer. It's kind of an essentially violent context, actually. We should probably figure out how to change that. But it is a thing that we do in our bodies where we are constantly feeling the need to chase after the next problem and the next problem. And so if I soften my right shoulder, it finally softens, but then I didn't really change systemically. So now I'm noticing tension over here. And so I chase that over there. And all I'm doing forever is playing this game of whack-a-tension, as he says, where we're constantly trying to find the next thing to work on. And all it's doing is propagating this part of our nature that is constantly discontented. And like I said in the beginning, if all we do is focus on tension, then we tend to generate more tension because we get what we're focusing on. And so I think that's a really important point. Yeah. And the seeming conflict that you mentioned between accepting things as they are and looking for things to change. Maybe the context shift there is that even if I'm fully contented with how things are, part of contentment is this feeling of the joy we get from nourishing something. So if I'm fully contented in my life and I notice that the plants in my pot is looking a little sad, I still go over and water it. And watering that plant isn't me being discontented with the plant. It's part of me loving the plant. It's part of me loving the moment and my chance to do something for that plant. If I'm perfectly contented and I see somebody step in front of a car and I reach out and pull that person out of the way from the car, I don't have to feel discontented with my own existence in order to help that person. If I cut my arm, even in that moment of having a wound, you could still feel perfectly content, oh, this is just life, and still stop the bleeding at the same time. You don't have to lie on the ground and bleed to death in some sort of attempt to become comfortable and contented. And so, yeah, that it is a thing that the mind says, that if I don't try to control everything, if I relax even for a second, everything will go to hell. And it's just not true. That if we settle into the present moment and become clear and wait just a little bit for things to settle, then it actually becomes easier to take care of lives rather than differentiation. And it's just in the approach, and it makes a huge difference. So while we're here, if I may, we can't quite reach all the way to the back, but perhaps reach to the back of your arm as best you can through here, softening this line. And as well, just kind of softening down toward the elbow. So if I am just allowing this movement to go down from my shoulder blade toward my elbow, down the back of the arm. Notice how that feels. And I've talked before about how this is often an area that gets neglected and it's a bit cold and stiff on a lot of people. So taking the time to warm and ease this line can be very helpful. And it is the theme of the day, this particular channel.
I missed a comment from Ray earlier that I think related to one
Oh,
of
we
the
have a Ray.
practices.
Hi, Ray.
He said softening the tongue as well. So I don't know if that strikes a thought.
Yeah. No, it's really true that even something like hanging onto our throat on the inside or holding our breath, or people will sort of grip their eyes from behind, and that spreads out as well. It's kind of amazing. Yeah. People, I mean, it can be something, I've treated people for headaches and jaw tension that was relieved when they stopped tying their hair so tight. That's actually happened 2 or 3 times in my clinic, that the pain and discomfort went away when people stopped pulling their hair buns so tight. Just that. You know, how many people are wearing shoes that are too tight, or they're lying in a bed that isn't comfortable at night, so they wake up with all of these problems. Sometimes it's these little corrections that make a huge difference. And within our practice, something softening the base of the tongue, like Ray is mentioning, and make sure you don't hold your breath. These very seemingly minor changes can shift our whole body and our outlook. So coming down here, moving through some of these basic points that we've been working on. And while we do, we can review the points we've worked on this week. Ray, I'm not sure if you've been here. We've been slowly helping people memorize the 12 basic channels, the meridians, and the fingers that they are associated with. And just as a way to stimulate the memory, spaced repetition, you can say out loud to yourself, since I can't hear you anyway, or can I? What channel goes to the thumb? And then, as you soften the large intestine point here, from here and then these down below, what channel goes to the index finger? And can you, in your mind, have a rough sketch of the line from the shoulder to the finger? Very useful to know. How about the middle finger? Are you able to recall which channel runs to the middle finger and the basic line along the arm, even if it's just on the top or on the bottom of the arm? Releasing and softening the wrist. Remember that you are not sinking in too deep. You're not trying to push in. You're simply softening that layer just beneath the skin on top of the musculature, around the tendons and the spaces in between. So your intention soaks into the tissues like fluid. Speaking of the middle finger and also the fourth finger, the ring finger, do you have a sense of which channel goes to the ring finger? Can you remember where it runs along the arm? And yesterday we worked on the inside line of the little finger, the heart channel. And so we worked on these points here yesterday. So if you'd like to reach around and soften that line. And then today we will also include separate points right next to that. This small intestine channel that we're focusing on not only runs to the little finger right next to the heart channel, but the channels are physically very close to each other on the arm. And so we often get to stimulate the points at the same time. This will be one example. So if I was to draw a line from the outside edge of my little finger up the side of my hand, up along the bone here toward my shoulder blade, you have the small intestine channel. And so as I'm touching here and moving the heart channel, by letting my fingers come up a little bit, we can also warm and regulate and release that tissue that's part of the small intestine channel. So I will just use my fingers here and just soften along that line. And as well, just to follow this line, what if I continued up the outside of my hand and just beneath this knuckle, but just beneath the little knuckle of the fist, if you were to close your hand, usually there's a little space there or the end of a line on your hand, right in there. What if we soften that space and ease that point? I'll just use my finger so it's easier to see.
I'm not sure if you want to answer this now, but we have a question about which channel goes to the ring finger. They missed yesterday's class.
Oh, I will leave it to Mr. Chris or anybody who'd like to talk about it in the comment section, because it's good practice. So this point here, you'll notice sometimes we stimulate and open this point as we are stimulating this point here on the hand, large intestine 4. I put my thumb into one and my other finger into the other side, and then I circle both. This is small intestine 3. Hoshi, it's a really wonderful point. Very good for the spine at this point. And so you'll notice now I'm doing large intestine 4 and continuing to soften and release around small intestine 3. Easing open. And now let's go ahead and pull through and off of the fingers, gently encouraging circulation through the tissues there. Especially, of course, the small finger again. And just to hear it out loud for yourself, you can say the 2 channels that you now know run to the little finger. And I encourage you to use the memory tools. That is to create an image for the small intestine, which is a bit of an unknown thing for most people. It's a big mass of organs here, but most people don't know much about it. But if you can create some kind of image for yourself that relates to the small intestine, and then create an image that relates to the little finger, the outside of the arm, and just relate the 2. Find a way to connect the 2 in a funny image or something like that. And we've had some really wonderful images thus far that people share in the comments. And so I've heard that Steph had a really good one that she didn't want to share. So Miss Steph, if you'd like to share with us the one from yesterday, or if you have a good one today. No pressure, but do it. And then softening open the shoulder. As much as we can, we want to share these memory methods with each other. Makes everything a bit easier. Easy and soft, gently opening. Remember that as we release this fascial lining that leads to the shoulder, we're releasing everything through, outward, and down. We're not pulling things forward and not trying to push it back. Everything's releasing this direction. So part of our intention is around helping encourage that release. Easing open space beneath in the armpit. Perhaps some of you remember which channel starts here. It's okay if you don't, and it's okay if you're not interested. But for those of you that are trying to learn a little bit of Chinese medicine, I thought that this is a fun way to do it. Remember that as your elbow comes up, your shoulder blade softens down. So by reaching up here, this is actually part of the relaxing of your shoulder. And if that's difficult, you can always use your other hand to help lift your arm so that you can soften this area up here gently. Not trying to dig in with your fingers, just releasing. Easy and soft. Remember to emphasize this line as far as you can comfortably reach back and through here, just because of the channel we're emphasizing today. But this process of letting everything come from behind and settle down toward the elbow, along the back of the arm. Remember to soften these points around the elbow. You can use your fingertips. Sometimes I like to use the small knuckle on my fist to settle into that point. This week, for some reason, it's felt really good for me to use just the base of my thumb to release. You want to allow your awareness to soak into that layer we're emphasizing, the space just beneath the skin. And then notice if there's a sense of softness spreading out, of gentle release. And then do whatever it is that encourages that. Sometimes it's making faster or slower circles, using a different spot on your hand. Sometimes if you notice that you change your intention, maybe if you're a bit more friendly or a bit more loving, then suddenly your tissue starts to let go. That's a real thing, and it's worth trying. Easing everything open. So again, I'll just use my thumb here to illustrate this softening of the small intestine line. Some of it comes around, but there's this movement around the bone beneath it. Just up here on top. And especially if you've experienced wrist injuries, maybe you're somebody who uses a hammer quite a lot or a racket, this movement will often cause a thickening and even a muscular imbalance through this area that I'm often having to manipulate somebody's wrist to help reset it slightly. And so you want this sense of softening and opening through this line, as well as, of course, with this heart line here. And so that's why it's nice that we ease open this area all at once in our normal way. Gentle circles. Kind, soft. And then similarly, this point down here, the side of the hand, small intestine 3, you can allow your awareness and your fingers to soften into that line. And then if you'd like to continue with that while doing the large intestine 4, you certainly can.
Have you explained what the triple warmer is?
I've tried relating it a little bit to the new Western concept of the interstitium. But the triple warmer is a large thing and probably outside the scope of this discussion, but it relates to and communicates through the whole body, like most of our systems do. It's a very important aspect of our immune system, of cancer treatment these days, of moving warmth and fluid through the body. It's a really large part. Yeah. And all of the systems in traditional Chinese medicine, just in case you haven't learned it, are more than just the organ. So if I talk about the liver in Chinese medicine, I'm not talking about the physical organ. Usually I'm talking about a whole system of emotion, a style of movement, a relationship to the joints, much, much bigger than we talk about. And so the triple warmer is similar. Every concept in Chinese medicine is holistic. And so they become large discussion points. Remember to emphasize the little finger. Especially the outside of the little finger, just because that's the aspect that we're nourishing today. The heart and the small intestine together. They are a yin and yang pair in the body, as well as the channels. Always these moments of settling, coming back to center, listening. There's a lot of discussion going on in the comment section. I see the movement, but I don't see what it is.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff. I'll bring some of it up toward the end. Lots of good
Great.
questions and stuff.
Thank you for keeping us sane and grounded. Mel is the gatekeeper. She's the bouncer that you put the secret knock on the door and the little piece of wood slides open and all you see are Mel's eyes looking at you. What's your business here?
Password.
What's the password? That's Mel. That's her avatar.
It's definitely me.
Softening. Again, remember, there's a lot of stuff that connects in through here, and we want to ease it open, emphasizing this downward direction. Softening and releasing. And again, if you have connective tissue issues, or if there's just breast tension and pain that you'd like to work through, this is a wonderful moment to take that time to do those breast exercises that we talked about before. And we all have breast tissue. And so anybody can require that if they're finding obstruction or pain. Softening open the solar plexus. Again, you can use your fingers if you like, your palm. I'm sure there's a number of ways to get in there if you'd like. I'm just using the base of my thumb. allowing that sense of warmth and friendliness to soak into this area. Then the space between the solar plexus and the navel. Softening around your breath. This is an area that tends to collect certain kinds of emotional constraint, usually frustration, anger, if it's strong enough, rage, but also guilt and shame. And so the antidote to that particular poison is this kindness, friendliness, this gentle sense of loving interest. So you allow that to soak into the tissues as much as the warmth of your hands. The fascial system responds strongly to emotional stress and restraint. But it also responds to unconditional friendliness, relaxation, kind-heartedness. These are all healing. Should feel nice. Remember, with these motions here, as your fingers sink into those spaces between the ribs, be gentle and allow them to sink in a bit more deeply, because that line that we're reaching sometimes settles in between the ribs as much as on top of them. So you want to move your intent and your depth around to help relieve those tissues as much as possible. Especially if, like me, you've broken your ribs a number of times. There's a lot of lining of both scar tissue but also fascial constraint that has to be released. I can actually feel it with my fingers. So you want to be gentle and to listen and to help relieve those lines as they pull on the whole body. A reminder to soften your hands and to allow that softness to be communicated into your body and tissues as much as the technique. Through this whole form, at the end of it, your hands should be far softer than when you began. Unless you spend the whole time typing. Then perhaps your hands are more tight. Gentle circles from around the navel, progressively larger and larger spirals, eventually covering the entire abdomen. We usually do 36 outward, 24 back in. We had a question about the direction. Mel, do you mind closing that window? It's
No, not at all.
shining right into my eyes.
Thank you for asking.
It's nice that the sun is out.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, thank you.
Much better.
So we had a question about the direction of the spirals. And it's a thing that people put a lot of emphasis on, dependent upon the tradition that I've heard over the years. Which hand goes on top, these kinds of things. And I think that the best way to think about it is that if you want to nourish qi, then to nourish the yang, then your right hand is on the belly and your hand travels up the left side to start. If you want to nourish blood, these are the yin and yang aspects of the body, then you do the opposite. Then you would put the left hand against the belly and you would begin your circles by going up the right side. And the way that you can usually know if you need that is if you are somebody who is still bleeding regularly, because that is a thing that humans do, some huge percentage, or a certain percentage of their lives. Or if they've given blood, or if they have lost blood, then nourishing blood is the important aspect of that cycle. And so we allow the qi to settle into these layers in the yin and yang cycles of the body. If you are somebody who tends instead to be more qi deficient and you work all the time or you don't rest enough, you're probably not bleeding regularly, then usually they emphasize the qi direction.
And that direction is yang?
The qi direction? That direction is, it sounds contradictory. I don't want to get people confused. Yeah, it has to do with being yin on the inside, yang on the outside, and allowing this influence to change. It's actually not as complicated as it sounds, but just knowing that if you are somebody that needs to nourish blood, then you should go that cycle. If you are somebody that prefers to nourish qi, then use that cycle. I'm closing when you're done. Allow your awareness to soak inside, softening down. Again, looking for the signs that you are settling. Your body becomes quiet. Eventually, you'll actually feel qi accumulating in your middle dantian. Maybe your breath deepens or your shoulders release. But also your mind becomes very clear. Your emotions start to settle. There's this separating of yin and yang, like that example that I used earlier of the dust settling in a glass of clear water. One sinks down and the clear floats up. And we have that quality. The mind is quiet. The senses are very clear rather than being confused with noise. And the body becomes relaxed, open, settled. You want both of those at the same time. It always gets cold by this time. But I feel warm.
Happy to get you warm.
No, thank you. It's good. I feel warm by this point in the practice, and so it doesn't matter so much. Remember that you want to soften open this point in the inguinal groove. And if this is uncomfortable for you to do for any reason, then you can always just wait until later when we lie down. But we want to soften this open space here, stomach 30 point for those of you who are counting, and emphasize the downward direction. This is relieving and allowing qi to sink down the legs more easily. Move things around here. Allowing your hands to slide around the belt vessel to the lower back. Remember to emphasize the softening of the shoulders, softening of the hands. If you need to find a different position or to use the backs of your hands, but please do avoid this kind of thing or this sort of thing. Should become comfortable and warm. You're still relieving this fascial collection that comes through here, which is very thick and powerful, the aponeurosis of this space. So we're easing that open, emphasizing the downward direction toward our feet.
And it's okay to brush slowly.
And it's okay to brush slowly. Yeah, you could even just rest your warm hands against your back and feel that warmth soaking into the skin, releasing that fascial layer. If your back is cold, of course, you'd want to be more brisk to allow that warmth to soak in, but then you can return to this gentle nourishment of that layer of the tissue. Softening the spine. And then as well, the tailbone, warming the whole tailbone. If it's comfortable, of course, you can place your hands directly against your skin. Allowing that warmth to soak into the bone. Softening along here, this point just at the base, or below the pelvic ridge here, the iliac crest. Especially if that's some space that feels very tight for you. And then off to the side, gallbladder 30. Easing that open. And then the sides of the legs. Comfortable and gentle. You can use your palms. Again, for some reason this week, the last 3 days, this area of the thumb for me has been feeling really nice. And I just say it out loud so that you remember that this is about what helps you release. So really tuning into your experience, learning to listen. Softening this point just above the knee on the outside of the leg, this top corner of this portion of the quadriceps muscles. Sitting in whatever way feels comfortable. If this is awkward for your arms for any reason, you can also always just do one knee at a time. And I'm doing 36 circles in both directions, but remember that on paper, ZhiCheng Shifu sometimes has these written as 100 or 200 circles in both directions. And so you can spend as long as you like, as long as it is continuing to deepen the softness. If it starts to add tension or fatigue or discomfort, then you've gone too far, too long. Find a different way or just move to a different spot. Then softening that space just to the back of the knee between those two tendons. There's a really fun name, the popliteal crease. Popliteal. Stomach 36, just on the outside of the shin bone, beneath the level of the head. You can go down the distance of one of your hands beneath your kneecap, and that's often the right distance down. But it's in the very center of that muscle next to the shin. Everyone's legs have a slightly different shape. Warming and softening. Remember that, again, you're maintaining this good posture so that if I simply fold from my hips, I don't have to round my back. My spine remains strong up through the top of my head because it is lengthened and comfortable, connected, integrated. No pressure put into the spine, just folding from the hips. Gallbladder 34, a little higher and to the outside of the last one.
And just a clarifying point, to hinge from the hips requires the ability to release tension in the low back, or no?
Well, the hips are related to the lower back, but if your lower back is super tight like this, and it tilts your pelvis forward like this because it's pulling everything like that, then it can be harder to soften because all the pressure ends up here.
That's what I'm noticing.
Yeah, and so that's that difficult line of learning how to release the lower back, which helps to free the hips. But yeah, there's all kinds of connections in through here, even from this side through the center of the body that connects to the lower back. And so it's one of the reasons we also emphasize this, making sure that the legs are free. Because if you're slightly holding onto your legs and lifting them up because you're trying to stay in balance, then that also makes it impossible to lean forward. And so, yeah, all of these aspects of the body are the same, but it would be the same, like if Ray mentioned how he talked about relaxing the tongue. If I tighten my tongue and it pushes my head forward and I go forward, then the same thing happens. All the weight builds up in my lower back, and now I can no longer release my hips. And so all of these principles are related to each other. And so continuing to breathe, continuing to soften, and just know that you're releasing here rather than pulling forward. That knowledge by itself is part of this healing process, coming to understand the body in a different way. Very often when like if you'll see me do something that seems impossible, perhaps. I get that feedback sometimes, that it's not that our bodies are that different in most cases, but that I simply see and relate to my body in a slightly different way because of studying with Master ZhiCheng and Ray. And so this quality of learning how to know that your body moves in a possibly different way than you imagine, just having that possibility begins to change how we interact with our bodies. That's one of the gifts of using things like animals or other aspects of nature, trees, as imagery when we learn our practice, because it helps us think of ourselves in a different way than we do, because we end up moving the way we imagine. So having these maps that change that is really helpful.
One of the questions that we can save for the end kind of relates to that, as far as how visualization can help sync the chi.
That's right. Yeah. I think Corry just asked a question.
Oh.
I just see a flash of green hair in the icon, so I assume it's Corry.
Oh yeah. Corry says, I feel like having a chair back or desk in front of me to touch my hands to when I lean forward lets me actually bend from the hips.
Yeah.
To Shirku on Thursday. I
That's
remember
right.
that moment.
That was really helpful. Yeah. Good point, Corry. I'll try to demonstrate that a little bit.
Yeah, I'd like to try that.
Yeah. We have a movement like that in the snake and turtle form that's based on that 8 pieces of brocade Badwanchin practice. And it's helpful for learning to release the hips like that. But I really like that Shifu uses the props. He's so good at looking around and going, let's try this. It's just amazing. And in the midst of all this, just a reminder to soften your hands, soften your breath, to let your awareness soak into your tissues, quiet your mind. Easing open. What's that?
I heard a lot of cracking. Putting my leg up just now. Snapping.
Snapping, crackling, popping.
Snap, crackle, pop.
Be gentle. No breaking our mel. Remember to soften and warm the bottom of the feet. And just a reminder, spaced repetition. What channel is it that runs to the little finger? And this is a trick question.
My day would have just spiraled.
There must be a good poetic name for that. Now I got her going. Gently opening that space just at the base of the calf. Move your fingers around a bit. Find if there's any lines that need to be released, but do remember that we are being gentle and opening. Kind to your body. Softening down. Only moving as far as feels comfortable. Again, you start trying to soften the hips rather than to round the back. Keep this long. Keep this long. And simply fold as best you can, lengthening your tissues. You're allowing this area to lengthen this way, this area to lengthen this way, which pulls them apart gently, but without a stretch. We're not trying to stretch. We're trying to warm and release. Letting your toes make a full circle, softening your ankles, your knees, allowing the movement to travel all the way up to below the sitting bones. Softening your waist, taking your time. And then if you'd like, feel free to lay flat. If you have back tension, knee pain, or for any reason just need extra comfortable things, feel free to place a little pillow or a bolster or a backpack or something beneath your knees, as well as beneath your head. And that can take some of the pressure off. You want to allow your body to lengthen. So your shoulders soften away. from your neck. Your hands soften away from your shoulders. Your hips release from your lower back, like we were talking about. The feet release away from your hips. The whole body softens. Comfortably breathing. Allowing your awareness to spread out through your body and become quiet. If you're laying down, you can move your hands and feet a little bit. Just make sure you have good circulation going on through your extremities. And if you'd like to, you can safely sit up. Of course, if you prefer to stay laying down, that is perfectly fine. And just take a moment to let everything settle. Become aware of that space between the navel and the spine. As best you can. And then as well, let that awareness spread out to include the rest of the body and then the space around you. Always maintaining a little bit of a light touch on the place in the very center with your mind, staying grounded, soft, and kind. Thank you very much. I can look at the pile of questions now. and as well, just in case other people have questions other than Del, feel free to send them in and we'll look at them too.
Yeah, so we have a question here from Chris. Does a sensation of a hoover sucking the energy down the bottom of your feet help? A few people online say it was one of the only things that helped them sink the chi. Do you have any experience with it? And then just a comment related to that from Del, which I thought was interesting, was sometimes I'll visualize small vortexes attaching to the points in my feet connected to the earth, and that can help.
My hesitation around something like that, well, first, my general statement, my caveat is that everybody will have a different relationship internally and different things help them. And so it's perfectly okay to find your way. And my concern about that kind of thing is that is very much of a doing rather than a don'ting. That the chi sinks, the mind clears, not because we're doing something, not because we're adding something, but because we're letting go of all of the things that are holding it up. And so if I'm doing something to try to suck it down or push it down or move it down or visualize it down or trick it down, then that can cause activity in the wrong way. Even if some aspect of your chi sinks, your mind is still very busy. And what we want to do is to understand that we don't have to add all these things. What we're trying to do is restore naturalness, not to trick the body mind into changing. All we're doing is restoring naturalness. Dao Fa Zi Ren. That's that. The way of the Dao is automatic. It happens on its own. It's self-so. And anything that we do that gets in the way of that causes problems. And so especially for a practice like this or standing posture, if you can allow things to let go, Qi sinks in the appropriate way. And it's different than trying to push things down or suck them down or visualize them down, because that's adding a piece that actually gets in the way. And so that's my only concern about that. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think about how Shifu or ZhiCheng Shifu will sometimes during the beginning of a Qigong practice will do sinking the Qi, washing the organs. And sometimes he will say, we're sinking down the body 3 feet under the ground. 3 feet, I think is what he says, under the ground. And I don't know if he intends that as a visualization technique, but I notice that it can be helpful sometimes to remember that I'm feeling tension in my feet,
right,
but I can also let go of. And so I wonder if that's why he uses
that's true.
that.
It is kind of a mental trick, but it's also, there's an aspect of our nature that actually expands around us in that sense. So it's as much a recognition. In the same way that when we're doing this meditation, our awareness comes out into the space around us, and it's included in part of our being. And so that quality of releasing down, basically we're releasing down as far down below our feet as we are up to our dantian. And it's the capacity to let things drop away, but we're not trying to extend. We're trying to let go even of that space down below our feet, even of the space around us, because we tend to hang on to that too. And so, yeah, I understand the idea behind it. You just want to make sure you're not adding, because that always is in the way.
Yeah, I think that's the trick, is using references like that as a means of letting go rather than
that's right,
getting really heady and cerebral. And
that's right.
that
Yeah.
kind of thing. We have another question here. Are single pointed meditations anti-Daoist? For example, is staring at a flame for 30 minutes to develop concentration anti-Daoist?
I wouldn't say that concentration methods are anti-Daoist, as far as I know. We have concentration meditations, even in the basic levels of Taoism that I've studied, that the difference is how we do it. That single-pointed meditation, the way that I studied it as a kid, because remember I was raised in these Buddhist worlds, it's this clenching, this gripping of the mind. I hold on to my focus. And that is the same kind of misunderstanding that I was talking about with the pushing the Qi down, that you can become single-pointed through letting go rather than holding on. That's what I'm always trying to help people do as we're practicing. When people start to get distracted, oh, I have this thought, this need, oh, what about this? And there are the two ways of trying to come back into focus. One is the popular way, because all we know is control and contraction, is we go, no, I will focus on this thing. No, I am focused. And that's actually a common thing that people do. The higher skill that can actually be maintained, because it can't maintain this forever. You get tired of focusing. The common skill can be replaced with the better skill of letting go again of the distraction, becoming less interested in the distractions. That's the moving toward actual awakening. Because what you learn is that I'm actually not interested in the things that my mind is saying that it's throwing around. Oh, it comes up with a thought. I just don't respond to it. I look at it and go, meh, and I come back here. And then eventually your mind learns not to distract you anymore. And so my mind says, oh, okay, I have this quiet intention of, I'm going to pay attention to my teacup. And you become absorbed in the teacup because you're not distracted. And you don't have to hold on to anything. You can do it indefinitely because you're just there. And that's when real practice kicks in. And that's more of the Daoist method, in my opinion, rather than holding, because anything that is holding is unnatural, and that's a misunderstanding. It's the same with softness. It's the same with everything else. We want to stop doing the things that are unnaturaling us.
Yeah, I appreciate Dale's comment about that. He says, wow, you can be single-pointed through letting go. Never thought about it like that.
Yeah, it's a common misunderstanding. And our culture, of course, speaking from my culture here, we are obsessed with force and tension and doing more and trying more. And again, it's the same reason I'm trying to, in 10 years, I want to produce that art piece about learning to play this instrument, because I want people to see that the entire time, no matter what is happening, I'm not holding on to anything. I'm just present with the instrument and hopefully attaining some level of skill at the end of it, never through any gripping or tensing of the mind or trying to need anything. And so I'm hoping at some point that will be useful for somebody.
So when I stare at the flame, I should let go, is the question now?
Yeah, if you're staring at the flame for a reason, but you could focus on anything, sure, but flames are interesting and fine. And what you do is you let go of everything that's not staring at the flame. Because you're just present. Present by its nature is still. The mind and the spirit is deeply still. It's always quiet. Mental tension is the thing that's chattering and needing all these things. The monkey and the horse example that I used before. And so you release those aspects. You just don't grip onto the horse and it doesn't take you anywhere. It goes zoom and you go, see ya. And you don't have to do anything. You just settle into the present moment because really the present moment is the only thing that's actually here. You just stop being delusional.
So we have another question here from Chris. When you're lying on your back doing turtle in the rain, what do you do when you get to the feet? Do you imagine it continuing horizontally into the air or bend down into the ground, if that makes sense?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I'm either, I think it's probably fine. As long as you're just releasing and it's just releasing through your body and out and down, I think it's fine because you're letting go. But I would be curious to know what you find when you do one or the other. Because the earth isn't the earth, the sky isn't the sky. It's not like people have this idea that I have to be barefoot, no shoes on wet ground, and then I connect to the planet, but we're like immersed in this giant magnetic field that we couldn't get away from even if we wanted to, unless we were in like a giant Faraday cage or something. And so really it's all fine. Just let go. Don't worry about that. Don't even worry about that added question. Just let go. And that's the peace. That's the peace spelled P-E-A-C-E.
I think that might be it.
Oh my gosh, with all those texts. I'll have to read them after class.
Yeah, there were a lot of really fun memory techniques.
Oh, good.
We're talking about.
Nice.
Really.
I love that. Yeah, so lung, large intestine, pericardium, triple warmer, heart on this side, small intestine on this side. That's all 6 channels for the arms, same on both sides. And tomorrow we get to start on the legs. It's very exciting.
And there is actually another question in here.
Mel's so good.
Okay. Is bliss/true happiness possible to live in 24/7? And are bliss and nirvana the same thing from your understanding? I feel blissed out until I have to return to the world.
Yeah, that's the misunderstanding of what bliss is. Blissed out is often, that's the kind of happy, possibly. Again, I'm not you. I'm not sure what you're experiencing. It's fine to change states all the time. If it's derived from contentment, like not contentment of I'm happy with what I have right now, but deep contentment of your nature. You're just here and it's all fine. Like I try to help practice in the very beginning of this. The positive feelings that arise from that, those are permanent. The feelings, every feeling changes. You get sleepy, you get this, you get that, you react to this. But if you're always resting in contentment, then there are feelings from that. And it is possible to always be resting in contentment from my experience. And so, yeah, nirvana, I think the original name from it just means cessation, like it stops something. You're cutting something off. I can't remember the actual Sanskrit, the Pali term, but it's to end something. It's like blowing out a candle. And so it is possible to blow out the candle. It is possible to let go of that aspect of you that wants and needs and craves. And that's the part that is disturbed and disturbable. And it's possible just to go like that. And now you're here. And whatever that state is nice. And it changes, of course, but it's that's permanent, as far as I know.
And Chris asks, I'd still like to know your opinions on spooning the feet, LOL.
Oh, spooning the feet. No spooning opinions. Be kind to your body. We love the body. That's a good thing. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate all the questions. No more questions that you saw?
I think that's everything. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just so happy that everybody came. I appreciate you all very much, and thank you for building such a good community. Yeah, life is wonderful, and it's nice to have you as part of the ride. Enjoy your practice.